Good morning, and thank you for being here. So basically, we're just talking about the future of gender equality in the Mediterranean region. I want to thank the Union for the Mediterranean for organizing this session in the conference in this very strange 2020 year. Please, I will ask you to react, to use all the different social networks that you will be able to see. Basically, you have them on the program, Instagram and the other. And here you have them. And now I'll be talking about the four members of the panel. Here you have the different social networks that you can use. So now we'll be talking about the four members of the planet that have a common mission, which is to improve the situation of the citizens in the cities and the regions to which they belong. And as you can see, so basically all these women have wonderful CVs and they have a huge expertise. So we have Madame de Rousse, and she is from the region of Rabat Saleh Kenitra, Morocco. Dr. Andra, who is a member of different scientific and cultural associations, vice president of the Cultural Affairs and Applied Scientific Research and the Political Bureau of the Inter-Mediterranean Commission. We have Madame Claire Hart. She is a member of the Montpellier City Council. She is a vice president of Montpellier Metropole region, and she is delegated. She works for international relations, and she is expert in social corporate responsibilities. She's a vice president of Refuge, which is an association that helps LGBT people. You have created a European network in order to think about this. You have received the European Prize in 2013 and the Legion of Honor in 2016. We have Madame Nabila Hamdan from the city of La Marsa, Tunis, in Tunisia. You are an international expert in gender issues, and you are a part of the international coalition to create a world norms to prevent and eradicate all forms of violence against women and young girls. And you have edited and published many books and articles about gender. You have received 2 prizes, of which the North-South Prize. And Madame Laura Celia, who's an expert that I know very well, you're the General Director of the Balearic Islands of the department dealing with gender. You are a member of the City Council for Culture and Citizens Participation. You have worked in heritage in Catalonia, in different museums like the Natural Science Museum in Barcelona, and you have worked in the paleontological the Catalan Institute of Paleontology. And also, so basically, no matter where our country comes from, women have a very important role to play. So that's why we need to face the different crises and catastrophes, being those political or none. So this session will allow us how all these 4 members of the panel are putting all the questions related to gender and equality during the fight against the COVID crisis and beyond the COVID crisis, because we hope that this crisis would not last too long. And I will ask each of you just to use 6 minutes and not go beyond 6 minutes in order just to preserve equality. And then we will need to have some time also to answer to the questions that we will be receiving from the audience. So, Madame de Rousse, Awatif, could you identify in this crisis what were the most urgent gender-related issues to treat? And secondly, do you believe that these issues are common to all the countries, north, south, east, and west of the Mediterranean? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Yes, you can hear me. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I am delighted to participate in this panel of women who are just working in so many different sectors here. I want to thank the Union for the Mediterranean. I want to thank the organizers of this extremely important event due to the situation that we are just suffering and that we hope we will be able to overcome the fastest way possible. I just don't want to rob titles. So basically we said that I'm a vice president of the region. I'm not a vice president. I am a member of the regional council, and I am the president of the cultural affairs. But anyway, this was my title. There was a little error there, and I just wanted you to clear. I'm a vice president of the commission, not of the region. But anyway, so now I want to talk about the programs that we have in order to better integrate women based on the perspective of gender equality in Rabat Saleh Kenitra region. Okay, I have a little technical problem here because can you hear me? Can the technical team hear me? Can you see me? Can you see me? Brilliant. Okay, so now I'll be talking about gender equality. The principle of equality between men and women. This is in the constitution, in the Moroccan constitution in July 2011. And the preamble, the introduction says that Morocco will combat any discrimination against anybody based on sex.
And in that same constitution, there's an article that establishes that there's the same level of rights for men and women in terms of civil, political, economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights. And the state must act in order to achieve parity between men and women. The constitution also establishes the implementation of an authority in charge of parity and the fight against all kinds of discrimination. And so adapting legislation to these principles, there is an increase of the number of parliamentary seats reserved for women, 60, and the attribution of quota in all the different organizations at regional level within the context of decentralization. In Morocco and around the world, the interaction in between the socio-cultural transformation and political reform is progressively addressing all these issues, doing away with prejudices, particularly in the context of rights. And we obviously as a country have signed several international conventions in the CEDAW and other. So the equality between sexes and their acknowledgement and respect of the dignity of human beings has become an obligation in which all stakeholders are responsible. The equality between men and women is an equality, an equal footing in economic, social, and cultural and social terms in general. And so taking into account the equality and the egalitarian treatment of men and women must be also something that is present at local level. This is essential for the realization of human rights in general. This allows women and men to have the same opportunities and obligations in all areas of daily life. Obviously, the healthcare crisis has increased the gap of inequalities between the sexes, but there's been an awareness of the situation and the equity principles in the region of Rabat Saleh Kenitra, which has translated into programs and projects that want to provide sustainable benefits on gender equality terms. So there is the ICRAM program, for instance, at regional level. This means honor. And there is a contribution of this program of 6 million of local currency, a significant contribution for the equality of the sexes, fighting against gender violence, and working for the autonomization in economic terms, for the autonomy in economic terms of women, and the promotion of female-led businesses, and also their integration in the public arena. And the reach of the program can be summarized as this. The Council of the Region is part of a program that wants to improve the standards of living of women living in precarious situations with protection and integration in the social spheres, providing funding of programs to increase their capacity and the capacity of the centers that look after these women and promote their social development in general. This program at regional level wants to work towards the family, social and economic integration, particularly of women in difficult situations or underprivileged, abandoned, homeless, women who are under arrest, or women who suffer AIDS. And the council in the region has contributed to this program with a cap of 715 million, if I see the numbers correctly, because there are so many numbers. But following on, with regards to the education sector, the team presents significant effort in terms of the improvement of schooling and the integration and the equal rights for the two sexes in this arena. Again, with the equipping of several classes, with the figures that you see on screen, to increase participation to the highest levels. And with this action, we've created community schools also, which are schools in the rural area, basically, with programs to improve the education offer in rural areas. These programs are particularly for rural communities, increasing the number of students with initiatives that enable to provide better schooling for girls in rural areas particularly. These are cross-cutting programs that want to provide better gender equality, to respond to specific needs linked to education participation and the underschooling of girls, while favoring also the schooling of boys. And of course, there are little details like building latrines, for instance, in schools, which is very important in rural schools. And there are also other actions with a view to providing the topmost hygiene in schools. Promoting the schooling of girls also addresses the issue of violence, particularly against girls, with programs for awareness raising on the equality of women and men, boys and girls, to reduce violence, sexist behaviors, and violent sexist behaviors in particular, which suffer particularly the girls, obviously. There's also a program to fight illiteracy, a program for providing guidance in professional and university matters, and also support for university cycles in areas, villages that are not long from the capital, where the university are in the region, with significant contributions for the creation of this university hub to favor access of girls to university studies. Obviously, there is an economic side to all this. This is a part of the competencies and the mandate of the regional government. This is one of the top priorities for the region, equality in economic terms, and the region's council has taken part, contributing significantly to a program to support the economic dynamism in various activity areas, and therefore better conditions for business access for women in particular. The region is part of alliances and initiatives with a view to increase the cooperation in the region to fight the effects of COVID-19. Programs designed specifically in recent months in alliance with the Institution for the Development of Cooperatives. There's also support to SMEs and small businesses and female entrepreneurs, young women entrepreneurs, and also supporting social solidarity economy, contribution to improve e-commerce, funding for various events for marketing, led by women and craft women, and also valuing the produce of the area in particular. On the basis of the legislation at regional level, there's also a promotion of female in elected positions in the context of a regional program, increasing the female representation. And on the basis of this program, there are other programs: the creation of a unity for training within the energy efficiency arena, also support for the creation of a training center for women in gardening activities, and also support for the creation of a regional center for the reinforcement of female capabilities and male capabilities within rural areas. Of course, there is great ambition in the regional council, in all matters related to gender, with many recommendations to create synergies among regions and local associations. And I want to really commend the work of the civil society and the associations in our region, doing a fantastic work during this healthcare crisis. I want to particularly mention Nadia Nayek, who has worked relentlessly, wonderfully at this level. And so the synergism between regions and associations, local associations working in this arena is fundamental. Drafting action plans for the autonomy of women, for awareness raising in universities with regards to the rights of women, which are there, obviously at university level, but we need to organize sessions for awareness raising. Still, we also want to create a commission for the Mediterranean, integrating the vision and the cooperation at Mediterranean level. All of this goes to show the ambition of the regional council to really do our utmost to see to what extent we can reinforce and consolidate our efforts. Obviously, the crisis has taken us all on the wrong foot, as it were, and the region has made every effort with all the challenges and the restrictions that we face to help the population at large and women in particular. And I don't want to reiterate all that I've shared already and that has been said already, because the situation is similar. There are many difficulties that women in particular face during the pandemic. All this to say that there is a great desire at regional level to take part in all these interventions and all these conferences and all these events, because there's so much to do. There are so many ideas also floating about that we must share and we must implement. Madam Nair has said that obviously women have been the group totally forgotten during the pandemic, and local authorities have played a key role. Indeed, they have. I could not agree more with that. And so I reinstate my agreement with all that's been said. I thank all the panelists and the organizers for inviting me to take part, and I trust we will meet again in many of these events. I trust there will be many of them to come, and hopefully face to face also. Thank you for your attention. I trust I haven't taken too much time. Okay, you have given us so many ideas for the future. Now we give the floor to Claire Hard. I wanted to just say that waiting for the intervention of Madame Darus, quite a number of small and big initiatives come to mind that are targeted to eradicate discrimination and to strive for equality, which is why I would ask, you are such a cosmopolitan person, have you seen any successful best practices in the region that can be replicated in other areas or in between the north and the south of the Mediterranean?
Thanks very much. Hi. Organising this fantastic event. To answer your question, Nada, I would say that experience has showed us right the way through time that public health outbreaks and crises have distinct gendered impacts, and that preparedness and response efforts must take into account, must understand the gender dimension of these cases in order to avert widening inequalities that exist already. And what I think we can say, and I mean, I'm looking at this from a French but also a Mediterranean angle, what we've seen is that the coronavirus crisis has been a major threat to women's rights across the world. And the damaging impact, I believe, will be much, much longer and further reaching than just the spike in violence and domestic abuse that we've reported across the world, in the Mediterranean, but elsewhere, under lockdown. So I would say, be it in terms of sexual violence or economic inequality, this coronavirus crisis will have this far-reaching effect. And when it boils down to it, and we know that this is always the case, basic human rights have become endangered and must be defended. It's when we know that when women's rights are impacted, human rights are at play. We know as well, and this is again an international situation, we know that women form a major part of what we call the front line of the battle against the virus, as they represent 90% of nursing staff across the world, according to the WHO. They earn less money than men in the health services, who often hold positions with greater responsibility. And the World Bank has calculated that more than 66% of the world's teaching staff are women, and that many of them are mothers having to juggle the needs of schooling their own children and preparing classes at distance during lockdown. We know this can lead to depression, to anxiety, and to burnout in many, many cases. So women make up the majority of service providers, such as cashiers in supermarkets, who have also continued to work daily during the lockdowns and often for no extra remuneration while facing considerable risk. Another thing which has really struck me, Nada, and I think we've seen this across the world, is that many women are involved in non-paid care work. And this, again, links in to these incredible stereotypes that we're up against. In countries like France, the confinement period has seen women's list of daily obligations multiply, not reduce, but multiply, and as they work from home while attending their children's schoolwork, on top of more household chores than usual, with an entire family at home to feed. And a recent poll showed us that for 63% of all families, women cook the meals, 63% of French families. Okay, another government study showed that 58% of women were spending 2 hours a day doing chores compared to 35% of men during lockdown. So you see, the situation for women is getting worse and worse. Only a very small portion of women are visible in decision-making arenas and policy-making during a crucial moment, and they are absolutely clearly sacrificing their career advancement in order to take care of their families. Another thing which struck me strongly in France is gender equality representation. I don't know what it's been like for you in your countries, but over here, and I've seen this in the rest of the Mediterranean, in TV media debates, we have no gender equality whatsoever during the lockdown and during the crisis. We have excessive presence of male experts designed to give an image of being more reassuring to viewers. And this is something that every night watching the television, it has irritated me to a point of absolute turning off the television in the end. Of course, we've also seen a rise in domestic abuse and sexual and domestic violence. We know that families being confined 24/7 has led to a massive increase, and we've had in France 5 times more reports of abuse via our government hotline since the beginning of the confinement period. Being confined with a violent partner means that women have less options to seek outside help and to avoid confrontation. We also have young girls unable to go to school and more at risk of being the target of sexual assault as well. Rise in cyberbullying, often with sexual overtones, since the beginning of lockdown too. And we know as well that pornography is on the rise, with a very nasty trend emerging in France and Southern Europe called Fisher, whereby photos, videos of young girls in sexual scenarios are published along with their names and contact details, with the pure and simple objective of humiliation of these young people. So we are looking at a global rise in the erosion of women's rights, and these hard-won battles that we've fought for many, many years on access to abortion, access to sexual health, and preventing child marriages, I do believe are being undermined at the moment. What is very important, Nada, is that governments maintain funding, maintain research, and maintain international cooperation programs on all of these fronts, despite the ravages that we're undergoing at the moment. This is absolutely essential. On the local score, we've been doing many different things to confront all of this. And one of the things, I think probably the most important things, is maintaining our helplines and our helpline services for victims of violence. So that is something we've been very, very centered on. We've also sought to train our police forces in the way that they welcome victims of violence. So police training programs and very widespread campaigns, awareness building campaigns to the outside world and civil society. Very important to hold out our hand to civil society and to work with our associations, NGOs in the field. And also we've set up very close-knit organisations to help care workers and caregivers, providing support for childcare, support for shopping, accommodation, cleaning services, this kind of thing. And we've seen a lot of volunteer people come forward and saying, I want to help our nurses, I want to help our caregivers. So that's fantastic. We're also working on a lot of projects against cyber harassment, and we're working at the moment on an international scale school project, which will be backed by the UN, to try and work against this absolutely terrible cyber harassment problem, which hits girls but also hits boys. Now, really, if I was to perhaps sum all this up, I would say that, and I'm a very optimistic person, so I'd say that to some extent, the COVID crisis has been a kind of stress test for future health issues. And what we absolutely have to do together, women and men, is to ensure that gender equality and women's empowerment are both integrated as a cross-cutting commitment in prevention, response, and all of the recovery processes, and that they become an integral factor in effective COVID-19 mitigation strategies and actions. While we're in front of a crisis situation, of course, it should be and could be seen as a window of opportunity to build back equal through gender-responsive measures, which really transform education systems, prioritize resilience, and address the terrible bottlenecks and barriers to true gender equality. We all know, ladies, that what is good for women and gender equality will be good for social development, society, and economic development as a whole. And we must, I think, take the COVID-19 crisis as being a pandemic which puts that truth into stark reality and into relief, and really raises the critically important choices that we have in front of us. Basically, we're looking at a situation where we need to come together and build back better and share those best practices. Thank you.
Voilà, merci beaucoup Claire. Je vais éviter de répondre à la question que vous aviez posée, comment ça se passe chez nous.
So basically, to the question, what's happening in the Mediterranean, in Lebanon, the situation is quite catastrophic in terms of violence, in terms of cyberbullying and all types of bullying and all the problems that you have evoked. And now I am going to ask Madame Nabila Hamza. We talked a lot about violence against women during the pandemics. It was a hot issue in many countries. There were many things to do. Claire basically just tackled quite a few of those, for example, the training for the police forces, etc. But anyway, I want to ask you if you believe that the awareness of this phenomenon during the COVID situation, was there a real awareness raising? And so the people who wanted to minimize the problem were just obliged to recognize that this problem really exists. Do you believe that the awareness about this phenomenon will just lead to create policies and measures that will be more efficient in order to face this unjustifiable violence? Thank you so much. Thank you for the UfM for allowing me to talk to this. I believe that the session that we had before about COVID-19 would be talking about the strategies put in place. But anyway, as you're just talking about COVID-19, and it is a moment that I believe this health crisis, to me, is a moment of restart. It is extremely important, being it for the governments, the civil society, the politicians, the municipalities, all the authorities. It's the moment to start all over again and to learn the lessons of this planet-wide health crisis that has never existed before. It is very clear that municipalities, because we are just talking about local authorities and the role of women in local authorities. The municipalities, the city councils now are facing phenomena that they were not at all prepared. Not only the municipalities, but the governments were not prepared as well, and all the authorities were not prepared, neither the civil society. So the cities, the city councils were just in the heart of the assistance actions that they were not prepared for. And basically in all the countries in the world, and Tunisia as well, there was just a huge increase of domestic violence. And this domestic violence was accompanied by something that is absolutely unacceptable, which was the closure of courts and tribunals. All these courts that were dedicated to family affairs in Tunisia were just closed. They were shut down. And with the lockdown, with the difficulty to access the help centers and refuge. So this really worsened the situation. And we should not forget that all the different help centers, the accompanying centers of women victims of violence are just very, very few. So in Tunisia, so we don't have loads of them in our country. So therefore, all these women who just found themselves with a man who is destroying their lives during weeks and months in their homes with their children facing a violent man. So basically they could not go to the court. They could not seek help anywhere. They could not go and talk to the associations. There are quite many associations in Tunisia. All these associations that help a legal, psychological help to women victims of violence. They could not reach them. They could not reach the police neither. And also, even when they could just get in contact with the police, basically, the police did not understand them. They did not show any empathy because, I mean, the police had so many problems, so many things to face, and they did not consider that the violence against women was a priority. Basically, the police could not move, women could not move because they did not have any legal authorization to do so. But anyway, so all this just pushed all the city councils to face extremely difficult situations. In Tunisia, we are lucky, basically, after a huge fight that lasted dozens of years for feminist associations. So we are lucky to have the 2018 law that is comprehensive. It's a law that fights violence against women. So it's a law that basically tackles all the different governmental stakeholders, also the civil society. And it is a law that basically tackles the victims and the perpetrators. So the problem that we have here in this country that is undergoing a democratic transition here in Tunisia is how to translate this comprehensive law of violence against women, the law 58, into real actions. So basically, all the different local authorities and the city councils that have to be prepared in order to put in place and implement all a different help process to help women, to receive women who are just victims of violence, and also specialized units within the police stations in order to help women suffering violence when they come to report about that. So a part of this infrastructure was put in place, but the whole of the infrastructure, and especially the creation of shelter houses, of help centers locally, all these infrastructures were not put in place, which means that COVID-19, I believe, just showed the insufficiency of a whole system that is not specific to Tunisia. It's a world phenomenon, and which means that in an emergency time, basically, we are helpless to help women who are just victims of violence. And if you add to this that the measures that were taken and that are still being taken by some countries, and that consist in closing the schools, closing the kindergartens. So all these measures, they put women in front of an enormous responsibility that is what we call the care economy that is added to the work, professional work that they have, which means that women found themselves in just closed spaces to manage their children, the ill people in their family, to prepare food, also to keep up with their traditional role of just cleaning and doing everything to organize their house, but also working remotely in order to be able to receive a salary and to help their family thrive. So basically the conciliation between the professional work and the non-paid work of women is a huge problem. So that's why we need to take into account by the feminist movement, and we are just starting to get organized here in order just to pay women for their domestic work and the care work that is unpaid until now. And this is extremely important, actually, in terms of lessons that we have learned from this health crisis. And now just to go back to something very important, I want to say something. I come from Tunisia, and I come from an Arabic country. There are common challenges that basically we are facing in all Mediterranean cities. All Mediterranean cities generally are still masculine cities in terms of the city planning, of the sports infrastructures, of the access to transport systems, roads, etc. So the right to access life for women in terms of accessing services, in terms of safety, and this safety issue is extremely important, especially in this period where terrorism is just striking back again, and the right of women to participate as citizens in the management of the city, in the local governance. This right, we don't see it in the southern Mediterranean cities, and it is the case of many other countries in the world also. So I believe that the cities are still spaces that are essentially masculine. These are spaces for essentially masculine socializing spaces. It is very important that all the cities, that all the women who belong to city councils, those women who can work in municipal management, they need to take measures in order to integrate the gender perspective in the local management. This gender perspective is absolutely paramount. In Tunisia today, we have around 20 women mayoresses, and we have almost 47% of women in the city councils. But also we have commissions and committees for women and equality of chances, because we have a new law now. You know that Tunisia nowadays is a democratic country that organized local free and democratic elections. So basically, we have gender-sensitive local laws. It's very important now at the level of the Union for the Mediterranean to put in place a strategy to help all the city councils for a real integration of a gender-sensitive perspective in the city planning, in the urban infrastructures, in the programs, in transport, in projects, and in the municipal budgets. I believe that this is an emergency, and we need to work in all these fields. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nabila. Thank you very much for your very rich intervention. And now I'm going to ask Laura Celia, because as we said before, it is this COVID-19 crisis is sort of a pause in our lives. It's just allowed us to stop and think about certain issues that were neglected in many parts of the planet, and even in the rich countries and regions. So I would like to ask you, do you believe that in your regions, depending on your experience, do you believe that this allowed you to think about issues related to equality of opportunities, gender equality, and equality also in terms of accessing culture, of accessing the heritage in the country, and all these issues that sometimes seem less important when the world is just facing a crisis? Hello. Good morning. Good morning to all of you. Well, before starting my intervention, I just want to talk about us. Who are we? Because I represent the general direction of cooperation for development of the Balearic Islands government. In the Balears, for the second time, we have a woman president, and she is the highest representative of our government and the responsible of the regional ministry to which we belong is a woman. So I am extremely proud to say that all my heads are women nowadays. So in the government of the Balearic Islands, so we don't work in gender policies. It is the Balearic Women Institute that carries out these policies. So basically, we're just working in developing development cooperation programs and policies. And in the COVID crisis, we have seen that these policies are extremely important in order to overcome very critical situations. And as Nabila said, this is a planet-wide crisis. And in this sense, so the local, global view that the cooperation world has to adopt is absolutely crucial in order to see how we can overcome altogether this crisis without leaving any people behind. And as I said, those who just tackle the gender policies in the Balears is the Balearic Women Institute. And in the Cooperation Directorate General, we have very close cooperation with this institute with a goal to transpose the gender policies that we have in the Balears to other countries that maybe are not as developed and that we cooperate with. In our strategic plan, the Mediterranean region is an absolutely key region. So that's why I am so grateful to be here in this meeting. I am just learning more than any information I can give to this floor. So when we talk about the different challenges that we have in order to work all the gender-related issues, unfortunately, as Claire said, there is a common problem, and that was worsened during the lockdown in COVID, which is gender violence. The Balearic Islands is a territory. It is the Spanish region where we had more reports about gender violence. During the lockdown, the Balearic region was the head of the reports of domestic violence in Spain. So that's why this is a challenge that we have to face, working at a local territorial level, and also in our cooperation with the southern countries with which we have cooperation projects undergoing. So we all share. I share all the problems that we had before, the salaries gap, the political responsibility gap, the entrepreneurial gap, and I believe that the violence is absolutely paramount, and we have just to put it as a priority. One of our priorities in the Balearic Islands government in terms of cooperation, in order to make sure that the projects and the tools that we put in place are really transforming societies, is just to work in what we call the decentralized cooperation, because what we look for is just really work with the organizations that are the closest to the citizens. So this decentralized cooperation allows us to really reinforce the local associations and the local stakeholders. So in our direct actions and all the subsidies that we give, there is a main condition that is absolutely important. So basically we need to have a local stakeholder that is present at a local or regional level. So in order to make sure that the actions that we carry out reach as the highest number possible of people. So we have a project in Chefchaouen with an association that we started in 2005 until now, and we have created a center to help the families called LCA that helps women and young girls who are suffering domestic violence and family violence. And also we have developed this project in rural areas. So in this sense, as an example of decentralized project, it is the tool that allows us to transform and to raise awareness in these areas in terms of the spaces or the tools that allow us to exchange our visions. So spaces like this one we have today with different representatives of different regions, realities, countries, all this allow us to exchange information. So the cooperation General Directorate, we participate in a European project called Medtown with countries like Portugal, Greece, Jordan, Palestine, and Tunisia. So this project, although it is not specific to gender, but yes, it incorporates important exchange spaces and experiences that have to do with the gender perspective. So in terms of all the initiatives that go beyond cooperation, I believe that it is of great importance to talk about the coherence in policy making. Nabila, when she was talking about the right to city, we need to think in a cross-cutting way, transversal way. So basically in our government, we are working in order to make sure that all our policies are transversal, cross-cutting throughout all the different directorates, the different institutions. An example is the alliance that we have with the Balearic Women Institute that allows us to use funds from the state pact against masculine violence in order to develop cooperation projects that help women who are victims of gender violence in countries in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Mediterranean Arch. So in this sense, these different alliances between the different government institutions allow to extend our policies and reach many more people. I believe that we have to work in a cross-cutting perspective. Our goals have to be cross-cutting as well. So we need to create a pact between the different stakeholders. You know, as the governments, many times we have different political parties who tackle different areas, and there's not much coordination between the different institutions, and we need to change this. So I believe that the cooperation perspective needs to listen to the voices coming from the South, to learn from each other how this sorority, this vision, this solidarity are absolutely key in order to improve our policies. And finally, I want to wrap up saying that the transformation has to be done within men, because women were just carrying out huge efforts in order to really push those limits, in order to reach these areas where we have never been. So basically, we're just creating legislation. We are just putting the tools in order to have the best gender-based policies. But we need to have a profound transformation within men, because if we don't have this transformation, we'll never reach complete equality, and we'll never really be able to leave behind these big problems like gender violence. And thank you very much for offering me this possibility to participate in this. Thank you, Laura.
Okay, I want to read a few questions sent by the public. I'm going to read them in English since they are sending them in English. Could you please repeat the question? Am I getting cut off? It's slightly better now, some speaker said. So we didn't really know what you asked. We can understand it in English. Are the panelists concerned about the rejection of gender-focused recovery measures? So responses that are gender-focused, is there a risk that they might be rejected? And how can we raise awareness on the role of women who are at the very heart of all these issues that affect them and their families? Who wants to respond? Nabila, go ahead. Thank you so much. I would like to go back to what Laura was saying, which I think is very important. We need to go away with some recommendations at UfM level on specific measures for cooperation. I feel the time has come indeed, not for declarations that people don't read or things that declarations that government sign and nobody does anything about it, but it is the time really to engage in feminist diplomacy in the region. When I say feminist, I mean there should be a new approach and a new impulse to true regional feminist dynamic, or a dynamic in favor of women's rights. And so there needs to be frameworks for agreement, for mobilization, for cooperation, for exchange, for expertise sharing, which we are lacking. Both in the north and in the south, we don't have enough tools, enough practical experiences, operative experiences to truly integrate a gender approach in the management of policy at local level. And so I think having shared action plans, agreement frameworks, coordination frameworks are going to enable us to take the actions already on the ground in Tunis, in Morocco, in the Balearic Islands and elsewhere. We need to bring all this together and combine it all together, creating synergies, exchanging experiences in order to be able to move forward. There's also a possibility to create networks of elected political figures who are women, people who are working for equality, for gender issues. And there's also the possibility, beyond creating networks, to organize annually or every so many years sessions to truly focus on the drafting of reports and documentation that enable us to explicit what are the advancements, what are the issues, what are the recommendations. And this is very much something for the UfM, with a program around all these issues in place already. We need specific practical guidelines, tools, specific tools to turn all this into operational tasks and action. The promotion of the rights of women, the promotion of women, the promotion of gender issues is very good, but we need to have all around true tools that enable to engage in a systemic integration of women in the local, municipal, and regional arenas. It is very important to enter into a regional dynamic that can translate into so many different initiatives, training initiatives, lobbying initiatives, expertise initiatives, mobilizing experts initiatives, and best practices sharing. Thank you so much, Nabila. You have responded all the questions that the audience had, which were all actually around this issue of best practices and shared platforms and platforms for exchanges. If not for shared action, exchanges among all the countries of the Mediterranean basin, in order to be able to support each other with regards to what works best and not so well. Okay, let me just conclude the session in a more positive vein, saying that yes, you have made a number of recommendations, and I would want to finish asking you all a question. If you could answer quite briefly. I want to ask about recommendations, starting with what if. So, according to you, what ought we to do to rebuild after the pandemic, particularly bearing in mind women and girls? The floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Moderator. I have a little bit of a technical glitch. Can you see me? Because yeah, okay, good. Well, there is a lot of good ideas around, and the best of intentions, and building on what Madame Nabila Hamza has said, obviously, we need tools. Without tools and guidelines, without all this, as Nadia was saying in her intervention, we can't move forward. We need to create the synergies, as Madame Nabila is saying. We need to develop partnerships. For instance, there are different agents close and far away that are working together with regards to results. For instance, there are communities, but there are also regions, Madame Hamza, which go, as it were, above the local communities. And paradoxically, there is also elected positions at regional level that develop all these issues and think about all these issues. If you want, there are big projects, far-reaching, that cover the whole region, and therefore the region focuses also on social and economic and cultural issues that are far-reaching. And of course, the details are important too, and the local action is important. But there is the coverage of the region also. at a more specific level, obviously, actions take place at communities. But beyond that, there is regions that also work around these issues. Having said that, the communities, rural or municipalities, need to indeed work around all this and take action in favor of women, action for the integration of women, as you mentioned. And also the territorial organization needs to take on board all this for the integration of gender policy at regional level, in the regional development plans, always inspired in gender issues for development, be it local, community or regional, that is validated and defined by the elected representatives, of course. And having said all that, without having explicitly seen this anywhere, obviously there is an interaction between the two levels on these issues and any issue. And obviously, there is always a back and forth communication concerning these gender issues. And so the recommendations by Nabila Hamza are, in my opinion, wonderful. She's done a good job at summarizing what we need to do, what is to be done. And I agree with all your proposals. Decentralized cooperation that has been mentioned, for instance, also by Laura, mentioning examples of partnerships in Chefchaouen in Morocco as an example. There's obviously partnerships, twinning of cities, cooperation at all levels, local levels, which is very important to draft guidelines and guides and manuals for the integration of women in public affairs in a cross-cutting manner. This is key, and all agents, all participants, all stakeholders must take action to that end. I can only agree with all the recommendations you've put forward, and the pandemic has showed that at planet level, we are facing the same challenges around the world if we talk about women. But we are slowly but surely coming to the end of this crisis. And to a certain extent, we've overcome the greatest problems already. And we need to start thinking about and implementing all these programs that we've already thought about in order to build better. And it is true that it would be good to meet more often, not digitally, not virtually, but face-to-face if at all possible. It would be much nicer. Virtually is not so good. But yes, I want to support everything that Nabila Hamza has said. I'm totally in favor of all her proposals. And I just want to finish by saying that we need to indeed establish practical guidance in order to implement all the programs that are there and all the recommendations that are and will be there and are being put forward. It is good to cooperate and also be very practical at the same time. And we must continue fighting. We are fighting and we will continue fighting at civil society level, at government level, at elected officials level, at community or regional level, whichever level. We need to continue fighting and working. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. I don't know whether I have the time to ask Claire to respond really quickly to my question.
We have to be innovative, we have to be united, and we have to be strong. And I fully agree with everything that was said about coming together and having a sort of multi-stakeholder Mediterranean exchange process. We've all got best practices to share. Now we have to get out and share them and build the platform in order to do that. Just that, simply.
Thank you. Laura, rapidement, très...
Adelante con tus recomendaciones. Okay, very quickly, because I fear there is no time. We believe very much in working daily, in everyday little tasks. So one thing we're going to do next year is to launch our own gender strategy, integrating gender and development, so that all the work, all the political action by the General Directorate incorporates and includes this vision, and will also make it easy for all organizations in the Balearic Islands territory that are doing cooperation can define their own gender strategies, so that towards the end of 2021, we are a bit further ahead towards this small change that we feel will have tremendous impact in future projects. We're a small territory, and so we try and work, being very consistent internally in order to strengthen our associative fabric, so that we are always aligned in our policies, in this case, gender and cooperation policies. This is our specific proposal for the coming year, and I want to also mention education. For the first time, we have a PhD program in co-education, training female and male teachers in order to try and educate from the standpoint of equality. I think it's important to train the trainers, train the teachers, so that they help deconstruct that male predominance, that patriarchy that is formed when children are very young, so that in the future we have a freer society, a society that is more egalitarian, free of violence against women or gender violence of any kind. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, for your wonderful contributions. And I remind you that the conference is going to end now, but there will be more sessions in the afternoon at 2:30. The title is Challenge Lab 1. What measures and support measures are necessary, in particular for successfully addressing the economic impact of COVID-19 on women and girls. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.